Coils, people. I hope that you've been being excellent to each other. My goodness. We're back again for episode 23, one of my favorite numbers, multiple of 3.
No,
in any
27.
Case, what I
27.
say?
20, you said 23.
Oh, what? That's not a multiple of 3 either. That's 23.
That's wrong too, dude.
Oh, man. I'm
We
in
need a
27.
mathematician in here now.
People, we are in the AM. All right? Forgive us. that being said, I think Trevor is in more of the AM than me and Bray. What about you, Connor? What time zone do you come from?
I'm at the 10 a.m.
So, not bad.
oh,
Not bad.
okay.
Yeah, you're in the best one.
Yeah, not so bad. Not so bad. Well, anyway, welcome to We Mortal Coils again. We have a special topic today for you. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about what love means to us, I'm certain. We're going to try and keep it on that discussion as best we can, but there's a lot of ways that this could certainly go. First off, I'm Stefan. I'm happy to be here again. I couldn't resist wearing the rainbow again. I wore it for Pride last time, but my goodness, we couldn't go without it. I'd like to introduce Trevor. I think he's got some announcements for us.
I do. Well, really just one. So after a long, hearty discussion with everyone in the our motley crew, I don't know what to call us coils, we decided to do a name change as of this episode. We are no longer For Mortal Coils. We are We Mortal Coils. The first episode in a while where there's 4 of us and we change our name. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And it's a long time coming. Weirdly enough, if you want a little bit of story time, this was the initial name idea that we came up with, and we changed it a little bit to For Mortal Coils. And at the end of the day, now here in episode 27, we decided, hey, it'd be fun just to click it back over. It makes more sense. It's more, it's terrible, but it's more inclusive, isn't it?
Organic.
It brings it's more organic. It brings everyone in. It's no longer about just whoever 4 are being recorded on this stupid thing. It's more about everyone. This thing that we're all stuck in. This thing, this life. Yeah. This life that we're in, and it's about us. It's about all of us, including whoever's posting hateful comments. You know who you are. With that, yes, thank you for listening. We recently had a huge spike in listeners, so if you're new to the show, to the podcast, to the web show, welcome. We're glad to have you. If you have anything you want to say or anything you want to, I don't know, if you want to post those comments, you can post them down below. We have a online community on our Discord in the description. You can click on if you're interested or not. Up to you. And with that, I'll pass it back to Stefan.
Good deal. So I would like to say something as well on behalf of Trevor, something that he's not going to say on behalf of himself. This podcast would be impossible without Trevor's efforts and Bray's, of course. I feel like an imposter sometimes. I feel like I get on here and all I do is talk, and they do the real heavy lifting. So shout out to them for certain. We're all in different rooms, but in one, if you catch my meaning. So today I'd like to also introduce Connor. He's our guest speaker.
Woo!
My name's Connor. He, his pronouns. I have a background in psychology and a little bit of philosophy. I've done philosophy with you guys at Louisiana Tech, and I recently graduated my master's in linguistics, and I'm sort of floating right now in terms of my direction, but I still engage in philosophy a lot and just enjoy reading things related to that. And so
very cool.
One of us.
I mean, just qualified as the rest of us.
Just finished your master's, background in philosophy, wandering around waiting for purpose in life. Welcome.
It's like we're all at a train station. There's no trains coming. We're just sitting around shooting the shit. That's really what
waiting
it is.
for Godot or something.
It's waiting for Godot. Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's quite literally the plot of waiting.
Waiting
for career
or waiting for the trolley.
Yeah, exactly. We're waiting for that trolley.
Everything
Winning since the summer of 1969.
Finally comes barreling down the track. Purpose, glorious purpose.
We got a lever, Well,
very cool.
Some of the things I subscribe to, like I'm mainly a social linguist, so I do socio work, but like a lot of the philosophy schools that I'm interested in are mainly like critical theory and feminist theory and queer theory, and more on the continental side than anything. So, but those are the things that interest me. So,
I would be fascinated to see analytic queer theory. I would love to see whatever that is.
I would be horrified. Absolutely.
Very curious. Very curious. Reminds me of those memes you can find. Analytic queer theory. It's just a whole bunch of people wearing trench coats.
I guess let me ask this question real quick. Hello, I'm Bray. I know I'm next in line to get introduced, but I would love to know more before we got really heavy into it, like about just the kind of stuff that you do, Connor, as part of like either that was part of your master's program or like just in general, I guess. Like I can think of so many things in my head about like what somebody with a master's in linguistics would do on a daily basis, but like it's probably very misinformed.
I read papers. And
there we are. It is in fact exactly as we expected.
At our department, we make fun of each other for how we speak.
Okay, that's good.
We analyze how we speak each other in a very like in an autistic linguist type of way.
Right.
You study. I find this really fascinating. So for anyone that doesn't know, I've mentioned this in the show before. I got interested in neuroscience for many different reasons, but the first impetus was how I have epilepsy, and I got really into it just to wanting to understand myself. And I think Connor, I find this to be really quite similar in this regard to like how one could become interested in linguistics. It could become this like whatever could be considered your own. Not that it's your own barrier, but what you think is your own barrier becomes the object of your fascination. It becomes the thing to which you encounter everything. It becomes your impetus, and it's quite interesting.
Perhaps I have had speech impediments when I was younger. But I know other people have had that as well. But
way to put him on blast, Trevor. My goodness.
Well, if you want to actually do story time here, I used to not be able to pronounce my own name. I used to have my own speech impediment. I'm serious. I used to. I was incapable of saying tra. Like if I ever said anything that was tra, it would be twa.
I happen to know that R's are the most hard thing that we have.
Exactly. That's right. And I got so much shit.
What we could not pronounce. Well, I don't know, whatever the kids were doing these days,
That's literally what it was.
Do that all the time.
Oh.
Yeah, but I guess like to address your question, some of the things I worked on was more. Well, some of the things I did not worked on, but like what interests me. Our program didn't have a thesis or anything like that, so I wasn't required to do one, which is kind of unfortunate because it helps you a lot in many different ways, especially if you're applying to PhD programs. But a lot of the stuff I was more interested in was language evolution and language contact, and basically, like my overall like big question was it was like why is one linguistic feature selected for at a specific time than a different linguistic feature? So it's like, why is this speech sound like this and not this other speech sound? So that's the term linguistic selection, and basically it's the same as natural selection in a way, but you're applying evolutionary theory to linguistics. But I also apply other biological theories such as ecology to linguistics as well. So you look at how the environment shapes the language that is there. So
it's to my understanding, it's a big topic of study. To get our quota out of the way, so to speak. Richard Dawkins, I was reading his book the other day, and he actually compared evolution to linguistic evolution, so the other way around. He talked about trading words and adopting words and stuff like that, and grounding it in a very human experience so that people could understand evolution better.
Yeah. There's a lot of I don't know if the use of evolution as like this overall larger theory is a metaphor or if it's something else, but like it has very useful theoretical implications for other.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes, yes, it's a very good way to engage with most things. I find, at least in science. Yeah.
And I guess one of the things I forgot to mention is that I do a lot of stuff in like eco philosophy. That's probably one of my biggest interests is in eco philosophy, and that gets applied to pretty much everything. So
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Do we have anybody in the audience, by the way?
Do we?
I thought maybe we
Clickety-click.
did, but I don't think we do.
No, it's just us. It's just us four a-holes. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought Michael might have been in the audience.
That would have been
But
fun. Me and Michael.
Without, who?
Me. You know that song from MGMT? Me and Michael. Yes, solid as they come. Also, by the way, Connor and I are both really close friends with Michael. That was actually a thing that went on during Louisiana Tech times. Three of us would meet.
His name in my context is Michael, open parentheses, cool guy from Railway, closing.
Really? Oh my God. My contact was just Michael Railway. That was his name. I swear to God. I swear to God.
That's awful.
Yeah. He was a very wizardy fellow that we met, Connor and I, just sitting over at Railway Coffee together. And then one day, this dude showed up, just started talking about Jung and magic, and we're like, all right, this guy's a pretty tall glass of water.
We aren't sponsored by Railway Coffee, but we could be.
right. Very easily. Yeah. Are you within the confines of this one particular middle-sized university? Well, do I have a deal for you? Yeah, go to this place. The internet
anymore. It's wine and bottle. They change it so much.
Seriously? What the hell?
Yeah. It's like a charcuterie.
Oh no.
Cafe.
Gentrified Cracker Barrel.
I was just about to say they gentrified the gentrified place. Like it was already gentrified. It got worse. Did you know that you can gentrify a gentrification? It can happen. It's like evolution. It's like evolution in Pokemon. It's layers. Yeah, it's like Raichu. It just gets worse.
Ogres.
But we were talking about love. I think that was the point of whatever this is. This waiting for Godot. We were supposed to talk about love.
Don't worry. But so I mean, once again, we're happy to have Connor with us. We are trying to discuss love today, and we don't have a specific jumping off point today. We would like to talk about love. How does one begin a discussion about love? It's hard to say. We could go around the room, so to speak, and ask the question, what does that mean to each of us on a kind of personal level? See what commonalities we have between each other, what differences, more to the point, and discuss that. Shall I go first or last?
That's up to you, sir.
Okay. Well, I haven't done a lot of talking yet, so I'll briefly go first. Love for me is a difficult topic. All right, and for anyone who has got a lot of mileage, so to speak, anyone who has been through a lot knows what I'm talking about. Love is one of those complicated things that can be advantageous. It can be limitless in its positives, nearly, but it can be so disappointing. It can be so sorrowful. I've asked the question in these words: why is nostalgia this painful? When I think about my exes, for example, I'm reminded of the good times, and I really don't dwell on the bad ones, and that's what makes it worse. It's really hard for me as an individual, like on an individual level, to dwell on anger. I just don't do it very well, and I don't know if I look back at my family, the family who stole my childhood, it's like, okay, do they, what were those feelings of love real? Well, they were for me, and that's what makes it hard. Anyone who knows what I'm talking about knows that it's just complicated. What about you, Trevor?
Anyway, and we'll be right back. How do I encounter this? I was, it's funny. I was just about to do the Nat King Cole. L is for the way you look at me, and then started doing the whole O is for the only one.
You should play that while I'm talking about my fucking tragedy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like start playing,
and then it's like slowly zooming into his face, like
just like the Oscars, or if somebody goes on talking for too long, eventually it's like louder than you are, and it's like eventually.
You ever look at someone and wonder what is going on there?
Pain and suffering. That's what. Love. So. This is a hard one. It is. This is one of those things that's just so not abstract, but it's so like it's so everything, it's so anything that it's hard to actually say very much the substantive on it. Whenever somebody asks you what love is, the usual go-to thing is to sit there with them and tell them why all of this is worthwhile. Kind of like the end of a Disney movie. Something like that. Like that's the moment. This is the time. When somebody asks you, what is love? If that question comes up, it rarely does. It rarely does. I think this might be the first time somebody's asked where the conversation has come up since the last time a few of us came together in a philosophy club thing. I think this is one of those things that's very rarely discussed. But if it is, very often your go-to thought where your mind goes is just this is the time when I tell you that life is worthwhile, inherently worthwhile. And we share this moment together, and we look at each other. Like the overarching narrative of my life seems to take me there. Like every single time I try to encounter this question, it constantly becomes that again. Connor, this is why your life is worthwhile. So on and so forth. Listener, this is why your life is worthwhile. So I might go there, but to try to be somewhat more concise about it, I think we all have our stories or our overarching narratives and like the little stories that flow and flow and flow inside of them and are them and all that sort of thing. And within those things, there's for whatever reason, there are those moments that we all have such different moments. We all live such different lives and these such different stories, but for whatever reason, there's this overarching, there's this arrow that flows through each of them that each of us individually identify as love. You could say that about any emotion, but I think this is the one that gives people the most pause. And I've spent many episodes now. I've spent a large section of my life, at least a large section of my adult life, trying to find things that, trying to realize how alone I am and how that's okay. And that's been a very ongoing, that's been a very serious ongoing part of my life where I realize however hard I try, however hard I hold on to you, listener, Bray, however hard I hold on to you, you'll flow out of my hands all the same, like no matter what I do, and I'll never see you. I'll never see you for what you are. I never will. I want to. I want you to see me. I want to see you, but nevertheless, there you go. I don't see you, but for whatever reason, so peculiar this is. For whatever reason, you and I still love, whatever that is. Now, I don't necessarily know if it comes back to the thing of not being seen. I don't necessarily know what your love is, but it seems as if there's some sort of arrow flowing through each of us, this thing called love. And with that, Bray, what you got?
Well, to continue the trend, I hope you know that we need to edit in while Trevor's talking about being so alone and all of these things. It's just zooming into my head and it's playing the 92 smash out hit by Hathaway, What is Love?
I was thinking of like he says Bray, right? And then like Careless Whisper starts striking up.
I was thinking that other song, what's it called? 80s, like, it must have been love.
Oh,
but it's over now. It must have been good. Through it somehow.
So it's good that we probably waited a while to do this episode, because I'll be the first person to admit that I have been in the past that person who's like, yeah, love's nothing more than a chemical process in the brain that's purely for social utility, whatever. Like, I'm Matthew McConaughey from Interstellar when he's arguing about which planet to go to, and he's there. What is Anne Hathaway's character wants to go to the planet where she her boyfriend or whatever was sent, and he's like, well, it doesn't make sense to go to that one. We need to go to the other one because the data says we should go to this one. And she's like, well, maybe we should just trust love for once in face of the data. And I'm like, but this is the fate of the human race we're talking about, and you're trying to, be horny on Maine while we're, looking to find a new place to settle down. So I definitely used to have a much more antagonistic view towards love. Not that I wasn't, I guess partial to it like anybody else. But just because I don't know, I haven't been a very romantic person, and obviously you can see this is where I'm going with it, is that angle first. There's many different types of love, obviously, but I haven't been a very particularly romantic person in my life, as much as you would expect a common person to be, I guess. I've been by myself a lot, and I actually quite enjoy it that way, without any overly serious commitment. It's just something that I find, at least in these developmental years of my life, to be something that's very comforting and allows me to do a lot of things. I think if I did have a love that I do feel very often and almost all the time, it is a love for art. And a love for, I guess you could say, storytelling. That's quite literally what my career revolves around, is the telling of stories and the many different ways in which we do that. Hell, you could even describe, I'm trying to think back at some other junction in my life at which I felt sort of the sharp pang of love, as opposed to sort of this maybe recreational or casual enjoyment. Like I've gone to see a movie and it was really good. Oh my God, I loved that movie. But that's not the same way as the love that I would have felt, for example, if I was going through a rough patch in a relationship or something, or a relationship ended in a not so splendid way. It's like, well, I can almost, what's the word Trevor would use here? I can almost visualize my overarching narrative and say, well, perhaps over the course of this time, I had added this particular person to my narrative, and I saw the story that I was crafting throughout my life with this person, and suddenly that's not there anymore, and it shatters my overarching narrative, and I have to rewrite my story again from the ground up because it's, my Jenga tower has collapsed.
Yeah, your house of cards.
Right. And so I think that's some point in where I would have felt, the pang of romantic love. But then there's also, like your love with family members, or the love I feel for my cat, which is probably the highest love I feel of all at this point, despite the fact that he's been an asshole. Yeah, exactly. But I love him, and he has no idea. It's a special relationship. So yeah, I'm looking to get enlightened, and maybe speak a little bit more about love of things that are not particularly other people,
sure.
Or just sort of things that grant us pleasure that don't necessarily have two or many legs, and speak or purr.
Well, what about you, Connor?
So I Bray. I appreciate your point on being that there's multiple forms of love, and that's really true.
That's
But
what we're going to eventually talk about, of course.
yeah, I have a lot of ideas in my head. So, but I think, firstly, for me, I could define love as like an emotion, an action, and a state of being. That's how I would see it, like initially. But also, I'd like to emphasize that English is a terrible language, and
I was hoping you're going to bring this up.
And there's one word for love which we use in very, very different scenarios, which mean very different things, and it's just like I hate. I don't hate the word love, but I hate English's use of it, because when we first think of love, we always think of romantic love, and there's so many different forms of love. But there's also, also within the hegemonic Western culture, there's emphasis on romantic love more so than any other form of love, and this is what constrains our idea of what love can be in Western culture, I feel like. But that's sort of where my interests lie in that. But if I would like to define what love is and not being critical of it, it's something which is it's a contradiction, first of all, and it's a state of being that is true in some instances and not true in the other. And it's just we always associate love with pain as well. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, but it's it's almost like a spiritual type feeling, and it's ineffable, and you can't really describe it.
I'd like to, Connor, I feel like you could sympathize with this, and maybe Bray too. I kind of want to bring up Kierkegaard in this regard. So, but before I do, I just wanted to say I was going to interrupt you. It would be very rude, so I didn't want to interrupt. But I was going to say, like Brony said, so what is love? And I was going to go, what was it? Fuck, it's that song by Foreigner. I want to know. Hey, I want to know what love is. I want to know what love is. Yeah. I want you to show me. I was going to interrupt and say that, and then I was like, oh no, that'd be a dick move. But so I wanted to mention, when you say it's a contradiction, like that, I immediately hooked onto, because I thought of Kierkegaard and this thing that Kierkegaard says. If anyone doesn't know, Soren Kierkegaard was a pre-existentialist philosopher, someone who wrote a lot on Christianity and the saving grace of Christianity and the next coming point of view in philosophy. And he kind of opened up this whole idea of diving into faith, diving and diving and diving. Being a knight of faith is one of the underlying things. If you ever take a class on existentialism, a couple things that you always remember is Kierkegaard, knight of faith, Nietzsche, eternal recurrence, this kind of stuff. So for Kierkegaard and the knight of faith is someone who dives and dives and dives into his or her faith over and over and over again each coming day. There are certain things you're not sure of doing, and you're not sure if it's true. You're not sure if there's an objectivity to it. You're not sure if any of this is actually valid. There's an undergirding all of your faith and belief in God is this fear that all of it is not true, all of it's untrue, all of it's completely invalid. But you dive into your faith all the same. And the reason why I bring this up is, talking of contradictions, in a way, it feels very similar to love. I don't know if you love me, but I'm gonna, regardless of all that, regardless of all these fears, I'm gonna love you. And I'm just gonna keep diving and diving into this love, regardless of any of my underlying fears, predispositions, all that. I'm just gonna keep loving you. And that's one of those things. If we're talking about a one-on-one sort of love, like a romantic love, that's very often for me the way that I encounter it. That underlying, I'm not sure about this, because everything's so chaotic. If you want it to be, you could very easily set the scene for yourself in this sort of way. We're all fighting narratives all the time in our own ways, our own personal narratives. Is it this? Is it that? Is it this? Is it really this entire time? Oh my God, it was like this the entire time.
Always
Like
has been.
clawing at your eyes. It's
It's
always
all
been like
Ohio.
this.
I'd
Exactly.
like to emphasize, Trevor, that is like I agree with you in the sense that there's this loving feeling which you like, which is like, I don't know how you described it, but it's like something that's exponential, and you dive into it and it's like continuous at the same time. But I think that is somewhat problematic in some ways, because you can still love someone and still hurt someone, and
Certainly.
even if you certainly like, I think people can abuse the use of the word love and incite actions of possession, which is not something that is necessarily associated with love. So like, one of the strongest forms of love, and like, I think I always kind of wanted to say this earlier, but like, one of the last acts of loving someone is to let that person go, no matter what sort of romantic or like type of relationship that person's in. You just have to let them be free. And I think there's like this in the Western culture, there's this emphasis that love is also a form of attachment, and we have this in psychology as well, but like, it's almost like a pathologicalization of love that we have in Western culture and in psychology, and it has a lot of it's problematic in many ways, but sort of.
I see what you're saying.
I would like to jump on something Trevor said earlier. So you said earlier, we're talking about contradictions, we're talking about, possession, and we're talking about, all these good things and attachment, right? So Trevor, I thought it was so interesting, and I wrote it down as well. You said that whenever you discuss love with someone, you might expand on that by saying, here's why you are worthwhile. All right. I actually had the not the opposite approach, but like maybe the inverse approach. Whenever I talk about love to my partner, to my brothers and sisters, to, whomever that I'm talking to, I usually approach it in the way of, you're keeping me here on this earth type thing. Right? You know what I mean? And not in a manipulative way, just an acknowledgement of like, here's why my life is worthwhile, because you're in it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, here's what you add to the kind of equation that
right.
I don't think I could deal without it right just now. And that being said, that still sounds like manipulation, and it's really not. It's really not.
Yeah.
What I mean to say is that, like, because and the reason why I'm so careful about that is because I have been manipulated in that specific way before, and it's not fun. It's not okay. And if you, dear listener, find yourself in that situation, you need to get away from it. You need to get as far away from it as possible. You need to get some space between you and whomever it is. I don't care if it's your closest family member. But if they're telling you things like, if I didn't have you, I'd kill myself. It's like, no,
yes.
You need to get away from that.
Yes.
But look, anyway, my point is that whenever I thank my friends, in this way, I literally tell them that the world would be less of a place without them. And I can hear Trevor chiming in my head right now saying, no, Steph, your world would be less without them. And both are true, in my opinion. My kind of simulated world inside of my brain would be less without these individuals. And but I also mean it in a different way, in kind of a more objective way. I seriously mean that the world at large would be less without these people in it. And that's how I encounter it. And I just thought that was a very, very big difference between the way Trevor said it and the way that I usually say it. And I'm sure Trevor has those same feelings. It's just that, like I said, we speak about it in different ways. We use different words. And I'd really like to hear more about what Connor has to say about that as well, like these differences in words. My significant other, Keegan, right now talks about this all the time. He loves language, and we talk about it all the time. That English has that like one word, and it doesn't suffice. It doesn't work. You know what I mean?
So you're saying like there's the emphasis on diversity of the individual, and that this individual is
worthwhile
in this world, and they add to it in a
and it's like that idea of the sum of the parts type thing. You know, we are emergent beings. Our consciousness is emergent. Our life itself is an emergent property. And of course, I'm going to talk about the science and things of this nature. What Bray said earlier is very true. Love is a cascade of chemicals in the brain. That does not mean that we do not experience it in a more emergent quality. In other words, love is very seriously more than the sum of its parts. And so are people.
So,
it's
almost like, I guess, to use a metaphor for this, or like a comparison, we can think about biodiversity and ecosystems, and how basically there's no isolation. Well, there's no like individual type thing in terms of like ecology. Everything is connected and depends on other things in order to live. So it's like that is sort of like a part of that, I guess, if that makes sense. Where
it certainly is. It certainly is. To bring in Dawkins again, just for fun, in his book, he also
talked about
how it would be very embarrassing for us, Connor, if all of the scaffolding that led to our species was still here. In other words, chimps are very close to us, right? But like, what if all of the intermediate species were represented still on the earth between us and our most common ancestor? And he started talking about how people might tell other people, you can't mate with something less than yourself, that sort of thing. But like, there would be different kinds of prejudice on the earth, depending on what kind of human you were.
Well, I don't know, Stephen. I think I'm going to need to see some transitional forms before I can commit fully to the.
Yeah, really. But you guys get what I mean here. We form these associations. We form these great attachments and feelings. And I'd love where Bray's going on this. I actually wrote down 2 more questions we need to answer eventually. Right now, we're talking about what is love, in case anyone needs a refresher. But then I thought to myself, why don't we just do this? After hearing all 3 of you speak, I said to myself, okay, well, then the question needs to become as well, why do we love? And then the question also needs to become, how do we love? You know what I mean? Like, how, those are 3 very different questions.
So, I have a bit of a story that can kind of connect to this. So a while ago, not a year ago, but approximately a year ago, I had a very strange night, a very strange moment in my life. I was, I got such rug burn. I was on the floor. I was on the carpet of my floor, just kind of writhing around, and I was in a really bad state of mind. It was a very, very bad state of mind. And I was in I was constantly going through these churns and these movements of how absolutely insane everything is, and how I could like die right now, and how horrible all of just you're going through this constant circular like a feedback loop over and over again of just abject just horror. And while this is happening, I suddenly started going through these motions of what would it be like if someone saw me like this? Like, I had this thought in my mind. And then I started imagining people, like visualizing people in my world just suddenly seeing me like this in this strange state of affairs. And each time it was very peculiar, and I think this is the way that I now characterize love. I think this really changed my life. I would visualize someone, such as like my grandmother, and she would see me there, writhing on the floor, and I got such fucking rug burn. My God, I needed lotion. It was terrible, like all over my right leg. But like seeing me like that, just seeing me like that, and then she would embrace me and say that it's okay, and then I would see like Bray, and then I would see like an abject stranger, and every single time it was a bit like that song. It was a very strange song, but as I was done dying, y'all know that song? You hear it? It's a very strange song, but you can find the music video online. Yes, it's as I was done dying, my conscience regained, so I began a struggle of nothingness strained, and it's like the song of living and dying and living and dying and living and dying, and every single time you die, you just get back up and run again, and each time you just go back up and you just go right back into it, and then at the end of it, every single time you die, you speak to a voice, and you're like, "I'm sorry if I hurt anyone," and then it goes, without even speaking, she tore off my face and sent me back into space, and then it all just started over again. And then each time you say once again, "I'm sorry if I hurt anyone," and then it just restarts all over again, like this underlying, it kind of reminds me of like a strange version of Christianity, or like more of the core root of Catholicism, or just any sort of Christ following, where you have this connection to what is it, like being forgiven and that sort of thing. Why did I say all this? What I mean to say is, again and again and again, I would see somebody and then they would forgive me, and then it kept on happening, and I felt suddenly a lot of love and empathy. And when all that love and empathy had washed over me, and I had lost this morbidity of my mind, and that feedback loop had ended, I sat there in the complete abject silence of my room, and then it was just nothingness, and it was perfectly quiet, and it was just silent for a while, like it was a little bit of a spurt of like smoke after fire, and then just clear wind. And it was a very strange experience, and it helped me better encounter love as this sort of as a bit of a balm, or some sort of understanding of what the state of affairs is. This universe is fundamentally this recursive and complicated and many interweaving feedback loops all around us, and this thing where you try to engage with it so strongly with both of your arms, and then when it flies out of your hands, you're not sure what to do. Love is there, and that's what
could
remains.
It be said, Trevor? Could it be said maybe that from your story, from what you were focusing on, could it be said that a kind of answer to the question, what is love, could seriously be when someone understands you to a higher degree? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I'm reminded of a line from Thomas Harris. He wrote Silence of the Lambs, and I want to know what you think about this, because you kept talking about forgiveness and empathy and things like that, and so like forgiveness requires that we understand the motives of the person who's done something, right? In my mind, it does anyway. But Thomas Harris, in his book, he's talking about Clarice Starling and Hannibal Lecter and all the other good characters and whatnot. And he was talking about Clarice at one point, and he said that very, very, she was still young, so it had happened few times that someone understood her and did not love her. In other words, as you get older, you meet people who do understand you and don't love you. And that's okay too. I mean, people are not required to love you just because they understand you. But it still hurts. How could someone know my story and not understand how I got here, and not understand why I want to do what I do, and so on?
Yes, I'm reminded of how very often we like to put on faces. That is to say, that who I am, who you speak to, Connor, who you speak to whenever you and I sit for coffee or catch up over the phone, is very different from what I'm like working in my lab. or with my parents, or with my beloved, let's say. Each person changes, and it's complicated. If you want to get into why that is, it's quite. I think it's really, really quite complicated. But one of the things is, you sometimes. I was going to say something about masks and putting on masks, but it's way too simple. It's just way too much is happening there. But just to say what I was going to say, you put on these masks, and they allow you to somewhat scaffold and defend yourself from that overriding fear that what if they saw me and didn't like me? What if they saw me and didn't like me? And that creates this persona that you wear from time to time, and it can go on and on and on and create a very dangerous calamity for yourself, because for one, it's quite lonely. It's a very lonely thing to do. It's a very lonely thing to do to yourself. But it's very sad, because if you did take off that mask, I know, Stephen, what you just said, people can see you and still not love you. But I would say it's also true that you could take off that mask, and finally someone has the opportunity to actually love you. It's like the first opportunity. It can't begin. Like, it's like I like what's it called? That James Baldwin quote again. Nothing that isn't faced. Not everything that can be faced can be solved, but nothing that is solved isn't first faced. Open up the opportunity. Open up the opportunity for love to actually take place. Either way, that was kind of a whole tangent that was quite tangential, but it was.
But is it attenuated?
No.
I think I could say something really, really quick about that. And then I'd love to hear more from Connor. I was trying to put something together, and I'm glad you mentioned that about masks, Trevor, because it helped me think about, I mentioned earlier, my position is very much of that person who's far removed from romantic ideals, or even, like, I think Connor said it earlier, sort of this, the word spiritual as it can be attached to love. Like, we feel that it's something more than just a chemical process. It might have been Stefan that said that. But I think it's useful for me to have that mindset, because I can visualize something like love as I could many things to try to understand them better, like thousands of years ago, or however long we need to go to look at, primitive humans, or what we might say base humans, where we didn't have these convoluted societies. There were no iPhones, there were no highways. It was very much just survival and reproduction, because a lot of the ways that we operate today are still exactly like that. We just have all of these layers piled on top of it. And so I think one of the questions was, like, why do we love, was what we were getting at. And so I immediately wrote down, well, loving as an incentive for reproduction and child rearing is probably the most fundamental and obvious example we could go to. And I think about
with allowance that it could be more.
Sure. And I think about what Trevor said about masks and things, and I started thinking about friends that I have that are very close to me that I would consider that I love. I may not actively meditate on the fact that I would say that I love this person, but if somebody asked, I would be like, sure, I love you guys, and I love people here that I know still and whatever, but I'm not actively thinking about oh, I love that person. It's just sort of subconsciously in my mind, the degree of friendship or companionship that I have. And I think it's because of all the many layers that we have piled on top of the way that we operate today. We sort of, by necessity, have to put on these masks, like Trevor said, or do these certain things, or act a certain way. And we, oh boy, I'm dancing around getting into a discussion about authenticity. We sort of have our core self that we selectively let people get further and further to, until they can finally come to know us, like, as truly as possible. And I've said before, to dip my toes into an existential discussion, that at the top of Maslow's hierarchy there really lies a a final pillar, and that is, meaning in life. And I think when you find somebody that you truly love, whether it's romantic or it's just some really strong
kind of
form
gaining
of
access,
companionship, you let them in and you connect on this idea of, I need to have a meaning in my life. And like you said, Stefan, they might be one of those people who, I've quoted Camus on the show before, the meaning of life is why you haven't killed yourself. And this person is contributing to that. Like you might have said, could be viewed in a manipulative way, but perhaps not in this lens.
exactly.
You are, I don't think, just to clarify for that particular quotation, no singular person or even collection of individuals should be your sole reason for not shuffling off this mortal coil, to pull in the quote from which our podcast is named. You should always have you should have a solid foundation from within yourself. I would say it is where that manipulation comes from when people, whether they're being earnest about it or not, say something along the lines of, well, if you weren't here or you weren't XYZ the way I want you to be, then I would just have to end it all, But I just wanted to get a little remark in there about sort of the way that perhaps we put up barriers and let people in to a more true version of ourselves, and we would consider those people loved or worthy of our love, perhaps.
Well, I think
For sure.
I was kind of thinking about when you were talking about primitive people and before we had their current state of culture. It's not that also people had they need survivability and reproduction and stuff like that. People depended on the land for they depend on their land for survival, but also there's a sense of gratitude and patience, and I would consider it a form of love to the land that people had to cultivate within themselves to to get resources. I don't want to say resources because I don't like that word.
Acquisition, acquiring material and energy that we might extract it and harvest it and kill our enemies.
And I don't like that. But it's like you need a sense of gratitude with your ecosystem and the people around you in order to live, essentially. And like in today's society, we don't really think twice about the food we eat or the products we buy and where that product came from and stuff like that. And there's a sense of like, if you disengage with that sort of culture, you are like, in a way, loving different beings. And like, if you acknowledge that like my shirt was made by someone in like Indonesia or something like that, and that person had to extract that cotton and weave it, dye it, for me to buy it for like $14 or whatever, and they're probably making 25 cents, then it's like I think there's also with love, you have to understand you also have to understand someone's history. And even this, when I say people, I don't mean just individuals or like human beings. I mean any being, and
or groups, perhaps.
Group. It doesn't have to be, it could be a rock. A rock is a being. I'm that type of person, I guess. But like, it's like, I think, and I think there's. I was kind of interested in the way you were saying about like understanding someone and then like loving someone. I think there's a really strong. I think something should be distinguished as like loving as a form of seeing, which is like the truest form of understanding. And like, you can't really understand someone without a sense of loving that person or being. But like, yeah,
Not to be Trevor about it, but like
Well, y'all always do this. Y'all always fucking
yes,
do
we
this.
do
Both
it
of you.
because look at the state of youth. No, seriously, we do this, dear listener, because we love each other. Okay, but not to be Trevor about it. But you said loving rocks, right? I
Mhm.
love rocks. Okay.
Yeah.
And let me explain.
Anyway,
So-
this has been We Mortal Coils.
yeah, but no, seriously. I talk about this all the time, right? I've wanted to be a scientist since I was little. I could call my mother right now and ask her what was just about the first thing I told you I wanted to be, and she would tell me scientist, and she has many embarrassing stories that go along with it. But it's seriously what I've wanted to be. And that being said, one of the most influential things that I've read that that kind of informed me on how to speak about this. In other words, I've had this feeling for forever, but didn't know how to put it into words. And for me, it's like such a catharsis when I do that. I'm sure it's the same for all three of you. But like whenever you finally have an articulation, a
Yeah.
way of talking about something, it's like, oh my god, like it's finally happened. You know what I mean? It's happening. You know what I mean?
It's a cathartic moment. It is.
But so I love rocks. Why do I love rocks? Because I can tell you all about them. You can show me a sample of quartz, and I can show you how it's put together. I can tell you why it's put together. I can. I'm a chemist, background, and my point is that it's not rocks really. It's nature. To quote Einstein, it's Spinoza's God. Einstein said all the time that whenever he referred to God, big G God, he was referring to Spinoza's God. And for our dear listener who may not understand what I'm talking about, Spinoza, it was said of him that uh, we have learned everything in science through his lens. He was a glassmaker, and he was. It's hard to say if he was an atheist, but we're pretty confident that he was. It's just hard to say back then. They faced very big persecution and whatnot. But Einstein referred to it as Spinoza's God when he talked about nature. Uh, you know, I I have a deep and profound love for this planet, this universe, the way it works, and honestly, it's one of the biggest reasons why my students listen to me. Um, it's not an exaggeration whenever our framework for like teaching says that you have to be enthusiastic in order to score higher. You have to be. Whenever my students hear me talking about nature and how we got here and stuff like that, they know that I love it. Carl Sagan said it this way: whenever you love somebody, you just can't stop talking about them. And I do that. My friends, I cannot stop talking about my partner. You know what I mean? But I cannot stop talking about science either. And here's the thing too. On a more personal note, sometimes it comes off across even to my closest friends that I'm trying to like prove to them my knowledge or some bullshit like that. And I just it that could not be farther from the truth. I just want them to share this love with me. That's it. I just want them to share. Appreciation is not the right word to say there. I mean, seriously, it's like, it's not that I just love the process of science. I do, but it's more about nature. It's a lawful being and so on. I don't know. Like, That's what I had to say about loving rocks.
I'm really, yeah. No, I just want to plug this in real quick because it's associated with like what I was saying, because I said I wanted to say something about the love of things that are, or perhaps like in this case, inanimate, like just they're not a living being with legs and they don't meow or whatever.
Yeah. The
and
universe,
things like arts.
The universe, except for people,
right,
is very animated, but we wouldn't say it has a consciousness.
Right.
Well, you wouldn't know.
And talking about just like being able to talk about things for forever, and I have been misrepresented before as being just completely self-absorbed, but it's because I could talk about my interests and the things like that I like, philosophy, or perhaps a particular book or game or movie that I had consumed. I could go on and on and on because I love those things and because I want to share that content and the feelings that I had with someone else. And I would love to feel them again for the first time if I could. But the easiest way for me to experience that again is to share it with someone else, or watch someone else experience it for the first time
vicariously.
Right. It's why reaction videos are so popular. Is because it's the easiest way for people to recreate their first experience.
A more cynical
something.
approach to that, Bray, like you said earlier, would be, why do we like reaction videos so much? It's because monkey see, monkey do. Like we're apes looking at other apes hooting at the screen together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I'm in here with on my 50th watch of somebody watching the Interstellar or some other emotional movie, and they're crying and I'm crying, and
there we go.
That's what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Of course we're apes hooting at the screen with each other. Of course that's true, but it doesn't have to be limited by that. You know what I mean? It could be more than the sum of those parts.
Ooh, two things on that. Two things. First thing, whenever people talk about like, oh, this is all just chemistry in your head. This is all just neurochemistry. This is all just chemicals firing off in your brain. It is that, and I think one of the ways to characterize it, we could say emergence, but I think that's an episode on its own, because I still don't really understand what emergence is. But
we should do an episode on emergence, and I just put in the Discord chat, I want to host a meeting about authenticity. Bray said something about it earlier, and I was like, yes, I definitely want to do that one.
That's next, because you really could talk about that. But so this is one of those things where these stories that are playing out, and all this beautiful, all of this which is beautiful, which is horrible, which is lovely, which is terrifying, all the different emotions you want to attach onto it. I'm kind of reminded, I've done this before, but like at the very end of like the last book of Harry Potter, like what's his name, Dumbledore. No, Dumbledore at the very end, like in like the dream space. Connor, have you read?
Your head. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it's all in your head. What makes you think that it's not beautiful or it's not real? Like, of course, it's all in your head. All of this, like, basically, let me set the scene a little bit. So Harry Potter is like, he died, and like at the end of it, he's like, or at least we think he's dead, and like he walks around, he finds Dumbledore, who also died like way before. And like they have a long talk, and then Dumbledore is like says some emotional stuff, and then Harry Potter goes, how do I know this isn't just in my head? And then Dumbledore goes, well, I mean, Stefan just said it, but of course it's all in your head, but what makes you think it's not real? And I think that kind of connects to this. It's, of course, all of this is in your head. It's the most real thing you'll ever experience. It's absolutely real. And it's unilaterally shared across everything in this universe. It's this grand thing. And I was going to say something, a second thing, which I thought was funny at the time. Something punchline. I don't know.
Well, we could talk about the ways in which we love, like Stefan was saying. How do we love? I would also be interested, Connor, if you have some sort of this might just be a crack at nothing here, but like as far as like etymologically love,
yes.
You had mentioned early in the episode that English sucks. We use the one word for pretty much everything, and you just kind of have to figure out what we mean if perhaps it's not your first language. Do you have any perhaps insight or knowledge about how the word, obviously translated in a different language, takes on a different meaning, or how it could be used somewhere else, or perhaps anything? Do you get what I'm saying?
Another good talking point, Connor, might be like, there are so many languages, right, that are so contextual. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I just don't think English is one of them, right? Like we have specific words for so many small things in English, but then we run into love, and it's like, well, contextualize it. You know what I mean? Like it's like a subversion of expectations almost type of thing.
I don't know anything about the etymology, but I'm like looking at the Oxford English Dictionary right now. But I think a lot of I think I don't want to like say what my agenda is for this topic, but like I always want to talk about the culture of relationships that are in the Western society, and English particularly. I mean, we are in
Let's hear it.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're bringing that to the table. You know, you go ahead.
Yeah, with English is a product. Well, I hate that word. English is a
amalgamation.
It's a product of like Western society, and English is the language of Western society mainly, but it's also used across the world. But it's also like it's influenced by the culture, and it's shaped by the culture of Western society, which is mainly like positivistic and like that there's some sort of like objection, and that we need objectivity, and that there is one right word for whatever you're using. So I think that's what I don't know.
That's fine too.
Hey, that's yeah.
Socratic moment right there.
Yeah.
We could talk more definitely about how do we love, right? Why do we love? I think we should talk more about how do we love, perhaps. So for me,
I want you to show me. I got you.
I've got a few ideas, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, really.
No.
I'd actually like to talk more about something less positive, unfortunately.
Oh.
So I've spoken on this podcast many times, and I never ever lax myself when it comes to these cults that we get involved in. You know, like as a people, as a species, you know, it just seems
you should
like
not
we're prone to envelop ourselves in these modes of thought type of thing, in these ideological frameworks and so on, and of course we're prone to that. We learn by narrative. We learn without being taught in our early years and so on. But what am I trying to say here? I've talked about this on the podcast before, that I was raised in no less than a cult. Okay. And I saw love being used in its most disgusting form, in its most heinous, I mean, just truly bodacious, you know, and harrowing ways. I saw love being used as that manipulation I was talking about. But more to the point, you know, there's this idea that love is unconditional. And at this stage in my life, I do not believe that. If my best friend in the world murdered someone, that would shift my understanding of that person. I don't think that my love for this person is unconditional. Maybe that's wrong. I don't know. But like, I learned in psychology, a while ago, that we're supposed to have unconditional love from our parents. And even then I'm like, how does any of that reconcile? What if your children are responsible for like something truly abhorrent? Do you love yourself at that point? Even, I mean, like, if I had a child who committed serial murder, it's like, where did I go wrong? I would start questioning my sense of self-love. And we need to talk about self-love, especially towards the end, as we always do, by the way, with our outros.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
But seriously, in the way that I was raised, love was used as a bludgeoning tool. It was used in such a way that, like, well, no matter what happens, Jesus loves you. Well, the deity doesn't exist, so how does it work? Well, it doesn't. And of course, there are actually two sides to this I'd like to dive a little deeper into. There was my mom's side, who were cultists, and my dad's side, who were cultists. I mean, it was truly a double whammy. But here's the thing. My dad's side, I had a grandmother who I really believe loved me. She had genuine feelings of love for me. And just kind of a layer on top of that, there was this religiosity that she could not get away from. And, I mourn her as lost, because she can't get away from it. And on the other side of things, I happen to know that my mother's parents never really loved me because they didn't know who I was. And when they found out who I was, they no longer did. So once again, I feel almost compelled to bring it up. Like, how do we love? Well, sometimes we abuse. And it's really important to talk about that, at least for me.
One thing I'd say about that, Stefan, I've been wanting to tell you about this for a while, but there's this YouTube channel that I think is worth anyone to check out. I want to specifically mention this on the episode, but there's this YouTube channel called Theremin Trees. If anyone has heard of it before, he's a psychologist, and just recently, he published a two-parter series of episodes about his own abusive upbringing. And I really mean it when I say that whenever I listen to him talk, he doesn't sound like you, but like, I swear, whenever I hear him, I'm like, is this Stefan?
Yeah.
What's going on? Like, he was raised essentially in a cult. Although he has a very different story in the regards of, like, his main crux of his upbringing was he had a very, very narcissistic mother, and very horrible things
to an extreme degree.
To an extreme degree. Like, listener, if you check out, like, especially episode 2, like, she just does horrible things, and constantly he lives in fear.
By the way, Trevor,
and disgust.
Just as a quick aside, just to let you know, the people that I talk about as being cultists most times, that they are narcissists to an extreme degree, and they had a lot to do with raising me. Maybe that's why you think of it all the time.
Yeah, it all connects. But I do swear, you really, really got to check out this guy. He's amazing. He's incredible. He's an amazing psychologist, and really, he's just helpful because he'll cover up and go into like type personalities and like how to deal with people that have like a hero complex or a savior complex and like that kind of thing.
Yes,
and how to deal with vicious narcissists and that sort of thing. And so definitely worth checking out. But he gets into like needing to let go of these things and learning how to build a relationship and often, specifically for him in his story, that meant detachment and learning that that's okay, and that doesn't that becomes an approach to this sort of thing. And it's not as easy as just letting go. It comes in waves and tufts. Like, he kind of made it look like a bit like a spiral moving outward away like this. And like, you get closer and further. Every single time you get further, you get a little further than you did last time. And every single time it's waves and flows, and then eventually you're no longer.
That's exactly how it happens for me.
To this person. You really gotta check this guy out. I swear to God. I swear. All right, I'll send you some links. I'll post them in the community Discord for anyone else who's interested. It's really good.
But yeah, so I mean, how do we love people? And we don't have to or need to dwell on the darker side of things again. How do we love? There's an act of physical love,
right?
Sure. I mean, there is that. That is true.
This is something too that I think about how this varies from culture to culture. For example, I've been consuming a lot of Japanese media, and something that's very popular in I don't know if popular is the right word, but it's traditional, perhaps is a better way, is in Japan the act of gift giving is incredibly prevalent.
We call that acts of service in psychology, right?
Yes.
Right. And that's even, what's those goofy tests that people take? They're like, oh, what's your love language or whatever? And, one of those is acts of service. I say that because I'm very cautious and wary when it comes to online quizzes and things like that, or personality tests and all that stuff.
I'm an NJQY, don't you know?
Yeah, what's your Enneagram?
Enneagram's not as supported, of course. In fact, it's labeled as pseudoscience. But like the
Myers-Briggs, I love horoscopes. They're my absolute favorite. It's all the same, really.
It all. Anyways, but in Japan, like even this other day, I was just watching a little clip that this person had put together, and they had like the little clips to go with it. And it was just like them, they had moved to Japan to live there. And it was all of these like elderly people who were just, she didn't know them at all, but they would just stop her and give her a gift or something because they could tell that she was a foreigner. But I was just like, these are, we may not say that that's love, but I feel like that's almost, from wherever that springs from, it's almost, to me, like a recognition of just a fellow human being,
humanity,
somebody that has an appreciation for your culture and your society, and so you provide them something that is, I would call it an act of love, even if it's just at its most base form of just like respect for your species.
I mean, all I can think of when you say that is it's like the dissolution of the us versus them mentality that people often have when it comes to foreigners. Let's say, whenever somebody comes in from somewhere else, most countries, most places, I suspect, although I don't really know. Well, of course, I can't know, but very often it's like if a foreigner comes into someone's country, there's this sort of mentality of, well, why are they here? What are they doing here? They better do this, they better do that, they better not do this, that, and especially if they come in to stay for a while, they get themselves like the equivalent of a green card and stay in your country and want to move in. There's this certain need of this creation of like, well, what are they doing here? What's going on with them? They need to change. They need to do this. They need to do that. It's a very us versus them mentality. Who are they? And what are they doing to us? And that sentiment, Bray, that you just listed there, it's very pretty. It dissolves that to some extent. It lets it loosen up and gel apart and allow for a better form of communication and actually seeing someone in their humanity.
Right.
I can't help but remember a story. A friend of both Connor and I, although I suppose I won't say his name, is this friend of ours who at Louisiana Tech, who is originally from Sri Lanka, and he told me these stories. See, Connor already knows who it is. At least he knows one of the two that it could be, right? But
by the way, I mentioned Michael earlier just because he's been on the podcast. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So he tells me these stories of like he would visit someone's house. And this like Arabic man, this Arabic friend, and this guy just gave him like really, really, really nice, not frankincense, but a really, really good incense, like a really expensive, like hundreds of dollars.
Wood.
Yes, yeah, the sandalwood, yeah, this really nice stuff where like you would put it on a little bit on you before like you do something with a spiritual context. You know, if you were like to do something religious, you would use this. It would be a way of cleansing oneself, or really, it's just honestly, it's just a way of smelling nice. But those small acts of compassion go really a long way, really a long way. It completely reinterprets the situation, and that goes over to narrative because it completely dissolves the way that you're currently scaffolding and constructing the narrative that you exist in at this moment. If it's just me and him, and like he's kind of an asshole, and like this whole thing, and then you have to completely reevaluate what the situation is when something like that happens. When something like that happens,
you say that, Trevor, but in some cultures and in some time periods, gift giving was seen as a form of dominance. You know, like if I were to give a gift to you, I'd literally be saying, I'm so above your station, I can afford to give you this.
Oh, that was a complete reversal of what even I thought. That's so interesting. That's so interesting. Because I was thinking, like, I give you a gift because you are the dominant one, and I need to bestow upon you items.
In certain cultures and certain time periods, it'd be seen, you know, like I said, I'm so high above your station that I can afford to give you this.
I think that really talks to the overall absolutely
arguably still exists in places very close to home.
Yes.
Yep. I think that it's almost, it's a form of pity, which is not necessarily.
We're gonna have a pizza party.
So I never thought about it from a lens of pity. It certainly could be.
It could. Well, that's what's insane about all this. I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. I mean, I was just lamenting the fact that I had never thought about it like pity.
Well, I think that really talks about this, Stefan, because if you look at it, it really speaks to the absolute insanity of all this, because it's through pity, it's through dominance, it's through the other version, but still dominance. It's through love, it's through compassion, it's through, look at me, I'm being Christ-like, or and then this other guy being actually Christ-like, and then this other person being, well, that's not actually Christ-like. It's like this. And then like, well, I'm going to do it like this, I'm going to do it like that, I'm going to do it like, and then it's really hard to grab the tether and grab a hold of something that's actually concrete. Like, it's really hard to actually, it's like we're constantly engaging in storytelling and grabbing hold of objects and items and acts and activities, when the overarching like narrative or the story or the sentiment attached to it changes every single time depending on the initial scaffolding that you had started with. And it can be completely independent and different wherever you go. It's very strange.
I think, I guess to back up a little bit, I really like your point on gift giving and how this has added to the conversation. But like, in an equal society, which we are not in.
Just to clarify for anyone who is not experiencing disparate wealth inequality, you know,
if someone from a higher social class is giving to you, it's likely that I'm going to say it's likely that they pity you in some way, and that billionaires give to charity and whatnot because like they have so much wealth but they don't know what to do with it, and sometimes they don't even give to charity, and it's just like, I don't know. But like with gift giving within like an equal society, it's more, I don't think gift giving is something that's unconditional. I think it's conditional, and you expect like someone to give back to you, and even if like
reciprocity.
Yeah,
I mean, we really should mention reciprocity.
Yeah,
you know, sometime, like straight up. I remember being on the dating scene more than once, of course, and you know, it was cancer sometimes, and you know, we should mention this. It comes back to what we were saying earlier. It's like this transactional affection. You know what I mean? I hate it. I really, really hate it. You know.
Oh God! Don't get me started on like. Do you mean to refer to something like sort of?
It's
while we could look at the ideal relationship as unconditional love, but many times it devolves into some sort of transactional one-upping contest, as in, you know, you've got to if I give you something, then now you are obligated to give me something back, or else I'm going to be like I don't think that's organic.
It's not.
It's engineered in a way to like constantly be demanding something from someone else
to return but not dwell on the subject. Trevor brought up narcissists earlier, and that's actually one of the ways you can identify them, in your life or inauthentic people, is this transactional affection that I'm talking about. They will disguise it as love, or and this is the dangerous part, they might actually think it's love. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But they will give some service or thing to you and expect reciprocity. Whereas what Bray and I can probably agree on is that it probably shouldn't be that way, probably ever, right? You should be affectionate one way, expect nothing in return, and if you get it back, then great.
Yeah.
I think maybe a particular issue is that, like, if someone expects reciprocity, they expect it in a particular way,
right?
And in a particular way, which they want, and like if they get it some way that they don't understand is actually a sense of reciprocity, then they don't really think they're getting back.
Receiving.
That's the important point. I'm very glad that you said that.
Yes, I can't help but like bring up Theremen Trees again, because he tells a really good story about like his narcissistic mother about just this. Basically, like, and I'll close with this because we're getting kind of to the ending.
Yeah, we'll wrap up soon.
Can I give an example real quick of like?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Like, one thing I wanted to say was, like, if in gift giving you're giving someone a gift and you expect something, you may expect something in return. Necessarily, that return may not be another gift. It may be the actual act of giving the gift, which you feel is like you get that in return, and you get the satisfaction of giving someone a gift. It's not necessarily that you're getting something else physical in return. That's like
right.
Very. So to talk about this story, it's a really good one. So basically, Theremin Trees, again, check out his YouTube channel. I mean, at this point, I'm just going to put his feed into the description so you can click on him there. So he tells this incredible story about like that I think really plays into this. So basically, he talks about his narcissistic mother, and for a time, and his grandmother would come and visit every night for dinner because like his grandfather, her husband passed away, and she didn't want to be alone for dinner. So she would come over and spend the evenings eating dinner with Theremin Trees, his mother, of course, and then the family. And she, the grandmother, would sprinkle a little bit of salt in her dinner, like almost every night, like just a little bit. And you would see this and go, okay, yeah, she likes salt. So what? Well, the mother, Theremin Trees' mother, this very serious narcissist, took it as she doesn't like her cooking, and was absolutely vicious about it. Absolutely vicious about
Looking for a slight.
And at the evenings, at the end of the dinner, she would go on rants, like angry rants, after like the grandmother went away. And it was to like Themin Trees, his brother, and his father. His father never did anything, never said anything. This is his mother, but he would never say a thing. And the mother would just say all these vicious, terrible, like, who does she think she is, putting salt and all that. She doesn't like my cooking. Then one day, she literally poured like half a container of salt into her dinner before she gave it to her. Like, I'll show her. Sprinkled and smothered it around in there. And apparently, like, the grandmother ate it, and she wanted to be respectful, so she ate a lot of it, and she got extremely sick, and had to be taken away. And at the end of it,
the elderly have to watch their sodium very badly.
Yes. And at the end of it, when like both Themin Trees and his brother are just horrified and curious what happened, and they're like, "What happened?" All of a sudden, their mother comes into the room, like, "I showed her," and she looks at them and to seek affirmation, like, "Look what I did! Didn't I show her what for? Isn't it?" And they both look at her in just abject, just disgust, like they're not sure how to encounter this. And it kind of contextualizes our understanding of what narcissism is, because the reciprocity there, the the reciprocity of like of give me this, I'll give you that, or really just anything. You have to realize that it's all happening within the story of someone else's mind, and someone really could think quite differently about things than you do, and it's quite true that somebody like that could completely contextualize reality differently, and it can quite literally build your entire world, and at least in this person's stance, a very negative way, and can really be quite bad for you. And that's a weird way to end on an episode about love. But yeah.
Any further closing comments, Trevor?
For me, I don't know what love is.
Say something about how to love yourself.
Oh, shit.
Take a walk.
Say what?
I said take a walk in nature.
Yeah, there you are.
Yes.
How to love yourself. When you... Okay, I'll end with this. Only a minute. When you sit there in your room, in the massive quietness of it all, and the silence of it all, you're speaking to no one. No one's speaking to you. You're sick of whatever it is you were saying, and you shut it off. When you sit there in the total quiet, and you feel so totally alone, and just that silence is there, and you're not sure what to do with your life. When all that is true, all of that is true. Just know that when you look it down to the barrel of it like that, and go all the way into it, the last feeling you feel, the final one, is the realization that that's okay. And I think that's a sort of love. And I'll end there.
Well, Bray, what do you think? Last words?
I would simply say, as a precursor, to know thyself, think for thyself. And once you know yourself, in order to love yourself, make time for yourself and run 101 miles an hour in the direction of everything that grants you pleasure, within reason. But, completely, dive into the pool of your interests head first, and surround yourself with things that bring you joy. Employ the use of your five senses to their maximum potential at all times, and be grateful. And what's that quote from the Seventh Seal at the very end? Feel and up until the very last moment the absolute, pleasure of being alive. However, paraphrased from, do it. Love yourself. Respect yourself. Rubber chicken.
And Connor? Last words?
I think my first principle of my ecological philosophy is that you understand yourself so you can understand others, and understand others so you can understand yourself. Take a walk, touch grass. I mean, like, seriously. So,
for sure.
I like that.
With that, people, we'll close up. I'm going to say something for our, continuing listeners. We thank you. You've heard this before. Tell us what you think love is. Tell us how one loves. Tell us why we love. We left why we love kind of open, and we probably need to talk about it again sometime. Let us know what you think. Don't be afraid to join our Discord and give us topic ideas. And on this episode, I will say my parting words. As always, take care of yourself. And more specifically, this time, we're talking about love. Your social health just matters. I mean, if you haven't thought about therapy, you should. If you haven't thought about journaling, you should. If you think it's not for you, that's okay. But as these other three have said, make sure you do things that you enjoy and that you can get into. Take care of yourself in this way as well. We need to mention it. With the act of love comes physical companionship. Your sexual health just matters. Go and take care of that. Get tested. I can't tell you how many how many straight people I know that have never ever been tested for anything. It's like, well, I can tell you're not gay. I'm like, you know what I mean? I can tell immediately that you're not gay. You know, but I mean it. With this companionship, unless of course you're asexual, comes risks, and you can mitigate those risks. You can. And that side of your health just matters. And I'm not bashful about it. I'm a science teacher. You know, so I just don't care. But you guys get what I mean. Go take care of that. All right.
I'm just looking over at the comment where Trevor pinged the chat, and he's like, "Might want to wrap up." I'm like, "True."
Might want to wrap up.
Might want to wrap up.
That's right.
We mean it in the depth of our hearts, people. You know, take care of your sexual function. Take care of your companionship. Take care of your social health and your mental health. It's all extremely important. And with that, we say peace. Have a good day.